this topic of divorce is important to me because, as you know, as we all know, right now divorce is like almost like an epidemic. Like it feels like it's hard to look around and find people that are still going, unless they're like boomers, like older generations. Actually, I can even say that because even when I was in high school, a lot of my friends' parents were divorced as well. So, me being at the age and in the season where I'm looking to be married and also looking for wisdom, I'm curious about that area of divorce and other people that have gone through it and what it was like for them. For me personally, from a Christian perspective, but also just in general. So anybody could jump in. What led all of y'all to having a divorce at some point, and you can just tell that story of what got you there.
So you're trying, you want to experience divorce or marriage?
I'm trying to avoid it by learning from those that have done it. So, and you can tell me that too. What did you learn at the same time? Like, what led you there? What did you learn? What you walk away from? I'm guessing you want to go first. I don't know. You spoke up.
I didn't. Ladies first.
Oh my.
This applies here too. But if you want me to lead, huh?
You can start.
Okay. So I was married for almost 10 years.
That was that long. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost 10 years, like just shy of 10 years.
Yeah.
And right about, I would say about maybe a year. Well, separated at almost 10 years after marriage. We got divorced actually like a year later. So.
Okay, you separated for a year.
Yeah.
So married 10 years,
Married
separated
10,
for a year.
Yeah, separated for a year and then got a divorce. But really, it's over. Divorce is just the technical part of it, right? It's
Okay.
just technically we're going in and we're taking care of the paperwork and saying we're no longer married to each other on paper. But you get divorced before that.
Right.
And I would say we got divorced as in we stopped really wanting to be in the relationship about 9 years then.
Okay.
And stuff.
I heard the 10-year mark is like the Harvard. Well,
It-
first it was
it is.
7, and then I'm married 10.
No, 10 year, most relationships go through a hard time every 10 years. Just, even after your first 10, the second 10,
Right.
you go
right.
through something. So
Okay.
anyhow, I think that was at the point where we started to feel like it was causing us more harm being together than anything, right?
Mhm.
You're arguing all the time. You don't seem to ever get along about anything. I mean, heck, you'll have a fight about what's gonna go on the pizza. Like nothing
Mhm.
you agree with. So at that point, it was more like, all right, this is not working out. So what do you want to do? So for me, we reached that part. I think we had a really big argument and fight. And
You remember what it was about?
no, it was something, I remember it was something not that serious.
So it was all petty.
Well, you have to understand, like something that doesn't seem that serious is really not what you're arguing about. You're arguing about the emotional aspect of things that are going on, right? So I'm having a fight with you because we disagreed on so many things and it's been boiling up. And now we're going to fight about
Whatever we can find.
who left the toilet seat up,
Yeah.
right? But it really has nothing to do with that.
Mhm.
So once you reach that point, you can kind of feel it. You both feel it. Like it's like there's really no love there.
Mhm.
Because now we're arguing about everything under the sun. So at that point, it was like since we had the argument and we did not talk for a while, it was like, all right, so this is over, right? So it was like, all right, so are you moving out? Who's moving out? Kind of a deal.
Mhm.
So at that point, I think that's when I was like, no, you don't move out. You can stay here. The kids, I'll move out. So that's when, to me, the divorce kind of happened.
Mhm.
Because that was when we agreed to not be together anymore. And then down the line, I say a year later, because we never really, I know some people, you guys may have had like a discussion like, hey, we're separating, should we revisit this? I know some people go through that, but it was never that
So
kind
once that happened, there wasn't even like a thought of going back or figuring it out?
we had discussions here and there, like what went wrong, what happened, like how did we get to this, that we're, really discussing divorce. So
Yeah.
you have the different discussions, and it's like, all right, well, what happened to trying to work it out? Well, we're going to work it out. So we did try counseling, and that wasn't going nowhere. Because I think you do pass, you can get past a certain point where it's like, it's a little too late for that.
Did that come in, was that before the separation or during the separation?
During the separation.
Okay. Was it
So-
a Christian marriage counselor or just a regular?
No, so ironically that you asked that. So when I was trying to decide what kind of counseling we should have, marriage counseling, I was advised by somebody, try not to have Christian.
Oh, right.
Right. And I was like, oh, why? And they were like, because I've tried both. And I know that there's differences in the two. And knowing you two and how you are, you may want to not try that route. I'm only saying that also because we do come from a strong Christian background. My ex-wife was raised Adventist, right? Like, so she, all her life, very strict into religion. And I wasn't, right? I was raised LDS, Mormon, Catholic, that stuff. But at that point, we're both Adventists, but we're not really attending church. And the person that I had the conversation with, like said, try that, try it, a non-Christian, see how it goes, see how it fills out. And stuff. But I did feel, as far as with the counseling, like we did pass that point and stuff. So, yeah, that's how it kind of happened.
All right, I'll go. I kind of want to paint a picture because I think, especially because of the point you brought up, you're in a season where you're looking to be married, but I want to walk through how it could begin, how a relationship that becomes a marriage that ends in divorce begins, and how it could end. So I want to go back before I talk about the divorce real quick. So I met my former husband in church, and we were 20 years old. I want to say we were both 20. Got married, I was 21, so it was the summer before my senior year of college. And let me go back a little further, actually. During the dating period, two things that really, really got me. Number one, when we decided that we were gonna date, he said, okay, both of us agreed we're dating with the purpose of marriage in mind.
How old were you?
We were 21, 2021.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, 100%. I'm not doing this
that's
recreational thing. I don't have time for you. We are dating because we're gonna get married. That was on both of our minds. But what he did, and this is what really got me, was because I'm very methodical in things like structure. So he said, okay, let's sit down and we're gonna talk about 3, 6, and 9 months. We're gonna check in at 3, 6, and 9 months to see where we are, how we're feeling, are we on track to eventually being married? And
So you had a 9-month plan to marriage.
well, that was the initial 3, 6, and 9 months, and then at 9 months we'll go and see how much longer we'll be. We ended up getting married in 9 months. We were friends for a year, and then 9 months of dating, and then we got married. But the other thing that really got me was, and I spoke to we had a conversation about mental health the other day, but I spoke to my therapist And she asked me, this is in hindsight, so after the marriage ended. She asked me, what core wounds were kind of touched on by the marriage that you went into at that young age? And one of the things was growing up, I really felt unheard. I felt like my opinion didn't matter. And so one of the other things that I really liked about my former husband was he said, your voice needs to be heard. Oh, that got me. So those two things.
Before y'all got married?
This is while we were dating.
Okay. Oh, so once you said that,
That was it. The 3, 6, 9 month thing, I was like, wow, I like that. That, take charge, have a plan kind of thing. And then that, your voice needs to be heard type of thing. We then got married. Now, I mentioned again previously that I wasn't ready to get married when we got married. I knew I wasn't ready, so that's red flag number 1.
Why do you say that?
I wasn't ready because I had said to him, I don't want to get married until after I've graduated from college.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to get married until, settled in the careers. So the goal was marriage. But I had 1 more year of college left. I just wanted to finish that chapter and then move into.
What season was he in? Was he around the same age? Or?
Yeah, 10 months older. And then, so I wasn't ready to get married, which again, that's red flag number 1. I didn't feel like I could say no. And again, I mentioned previously that when we went down to the courthouse, well, first of all, I kept telling him, because we hadn't finished premarital counseling, I kept telling him, okay, can you call this person and see if they think it's a good idea? We didn't touch each other the whole time we were dating. Like, he would come over to my apartment and there'd be a coffee table and I'd be on this side and he'd be on that side. We were strict about this whole thing. But we almost got close to it. And so he's like, okay, we got to get married, like now. And I was like, no, we don't. We need to have stronger boundaries. And so when he was like, okay, we really need to get married, like right now. I was like, please just call them, call this person, call the premarital counselors, because we didn't finish premarital counseling. And he was like, okay, I called them all. Are we ready to get married? I was like, no, really not. In my mind, but I didn't feel like I could say it out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And so we ended up going to the courthouse. The
Was
clerk
there like
said,
a proposal, or that was a
there
proposal?
was.
Oh, okay.
June 30th, he proposed. July 1st, we got married at the courthouse. So you can think about the timeline in between those.
Yeah.
One day. Didn't tell parents, went down to the courthouse.
Yeah, you eloped.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I didn't tell my parents till 2 weeks later because I had to get it to get it in my head, like, what did I just do? But the lady at the courthouse, she said, technically you can't get married, you have to sign the paperwork now and you have to wait 3 days to get married. And I was like, great, this is my out, this is wonderful. Stick to your policy, ma'am. And she looked at my ex-husband, she looked at me, and she was like, okay, get married now. And I was like, oh my gosh. I didn't feel like I could say no. So I really was not ready. Fast forward, now we're married. I was like, okay, I'm a wife, let's go. Let's get this thing done. So we talked about having family meetings and going to counseling and having a marriage mentor and making sure we were checking in with our mentors. None of that happened.
Super structured.
Yes, super structured, but none of it happened.
Why not?
I don't know. I would ask for it, and it just never happened. Never happened. And eventually I called in. Some things were happening that first year of marriage that I was just like, I don't think this is right. I don't think this is going well. And so I called on some people at church, some older members who were married, and I said, I have to share with you like some things that are going on in my marriage. I'm not sure if they're okay. And one of the ladies, she came over to my house and she said, oh, and she brought another minister over and they asked me to go into a car with them, we drove to a parking lot and she was like, you need to get out now. Based on what I told them.
Okay.
You need to get out now. I was like, what? Is that bad? And so she said, yeah. So they dropped me back off. She said, the next time something happens, you need to go. So I left. The next time we had an argument. I left for 2 days, came back, and...
Did you have kids at this time?
No. We didn't have kids until a year after being married. Came back, I told him everything that happened. And at that point, everything, like things were weird at first, but things just went downhill. I left 3 or 4 times after that. And came back and left and came back and left and came back. When I left, but he would ask, come back, please come back. So I'd go back, things would get worse, leave, go back, things would get worse. Until eventually I was like, can we see a counselor? Can we please see a counselor? You know, let's date. You know, even though we're married, let's date. So we eventually saw a counselor, but at that point, I think we had, like you said, reached a point of no return. Where eventually it was like, it's got to be done. Because it gets to that point if you don't take the steps to work on it.
Can I ask what it was that you were describing to them that made them say?
Yeah, it was 2 things that I can remember in that first year. Number 1, into the marriage, I brought my own car into the marriage. Now, when you get married, that's not your car anymore. That's your car and your husband's car. So I'm trying to be careful with my words, but I brought the car into the marriage. There's a point of me saying that because, so I was a student, he was no longer a student when we got married. And I worked on campus at the Counseling and Wellness Center. And I would have to and I had class. I had to wake up about 3 hours prior to when I had to get to work. I had to wake up 3 hours early to catch 3 buses to get to school, to get on campus. He woke up 15 minutes early, took my car and drove to the office. I was like, something doesn't seem right about that. Like, either drop me off or you could take the bus. Something doesn't seem right about that. Also, he would say, do not leave the apartment. Do not leave. You cannot leave. Which in my mind, I was like, that just sounds pretty protective. You know, it wasn't the best area. But the other piece was anytime we would have an argument, he'd take the car and leave. And I would be there, just there. So I told him these things, and also one of the women, the woman who I told it first, he actually lived with her and her husband for a few months prior to us getting married.
So they know him.
Exactly, and that's why I was talking to her, because I was like, she knows him, he'd probably be okay with me, you know, sharing with his friend, but he wasn't. He didn't like that I was talking to anybody about anything. But she brought a minister over one day because I said, hey, I'm not allowed to leave the apartment. She said, well, if I come and walk with you, can you leave? I was like, yeah, I guess that's fine. She didn't walk. She came over with a car and another lady in there, and they were like, you need to go. But I didn't leave. So we got a divorce 5 years. We lasted 5.5 years before I got a divorce. And then we attempted to reconcile, which is how I got baby number 3. But then we were done after that. And that was 2020. 2020 was a year of awakening. And one of the things I really struggled with, though, was there was not one day, I think, from the beginning to end of that marriage that, or the relationship in general, that I didn't have that I wasn't on YouTube listening to sermons. Because I was trying to, okay, how do I get better? How do I do this better? How do we get better? Is divorce even an option? So I was constantly trying to figure out, oh my gosh, what am I supposed to do here? But yeah, I reached the point of no return.
Rich, you got a story to tell?
My story is pretty ratchet.
Say the best for last, right?
Say the best for last. Oh, bad.
I forgot you were even divorced. We were talking to Sarah today, and she was like, Rich, she was talking about Pam. I was like, nah, before Pam, like way back. I was like, yeah, actually Rich was like the first to do it and get out of it. Like,
I got in and out.
How old were you?
25.
Okay.
I was 25. She was 21. So I kind of relate to what she was going through. But I had money, and I worked with her dad. So I was doing mortgages at the time. And so I met her after my first, so prior to being married, I lost my first child, Leia. And so it was probably 2 months after I met her. And I literally wasn't trying to date anyone. Because me and the baby mom, she was pregnant. I mean, we still respect each other to this day, you know, pressure. But, you know, I took care of her daughter. And her daughter was 2 when I met her. Now she's 22. So I'm the only father figure in her life. But buried her and then met the ex-wife maybe 2 or 3 months after. And it wasn't like, because Jerry was with me. We went to McDonald's because my friend had a asthma attack and they rushed him to the ER, so I went to go visit him. So I was waiting downstairs and she was in McDonald's. I went to the McDonald's and whatever, one thing led to another. We exchanged numbers and we started talking. I was already doing mortgages at the time and her father had a mortgage company. So I brought a deal to him. We ended up closing it. And so it was kind of like easy to work with him because I was dating the daughter and he had a mortgage company and he was open to me and a really cool guy. So it was just kind of like, hey, we're making money together. I'm good with your dad. He sees what type of man I am. He sees the family demographic. We dating. I'm not looking out there. I'm not out there like that anyway. I'm just working. You feel me? So I'm like, hey, you know. But then the father is like, hey, you know. I'm not saying he pressured me into. That's not what happened.
He was like, what are your
But
intentions?
he's like, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
hey, you know, you guys are together. You guys are. So I said, you know what? You know, make good money. I said, okay, we can. What do you think? You know, she was like, it sounds like a good idea. So it was kind of like one of those things because it was convenient, right? So, but I don't think there was necessarily, I believe we loved each other, but it wasn't like, you know, it was really more out of the convenience, right? But that's when I think because I was a person who would spoil, right? So I'm making money. I'm only making money for me and you, so who else am I going to spend it on? But what I realized is that it kind of put her in a position where she was working her job prior to meeting me and whatnot, and she was just out there. So she was more for the streets, where I found out in the streets. And so it was like, whoa, you know? And funny enough, I was like,
What you mean by that? She was for the streets?
oh, she was in the streets. So she, you know,
I'm saying you was
infidelity.
working.
One time infidel. One time slept with another man. Second time slept with a different man. Third time slept with another man. I said, all right.
This is within the marriage before?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Within the marriage, while we're married, and prior to us being married, I figured because one of the people she slept with went to school with my brother, and I knew his brother. I knew his older brother. So we hanging out, and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. I said, do you know such and such? And he's like, yeah. He's like, when's the last time you know? She was here like last week. I said, oh, okay, cool. I said, I don't know if you know, but me and her actually married. It was like that. He was like, what? Rich, I'm sorry, bro. I had no clue. I said, I believe you. That's cool. Pop said, hey, when you're married, you got to work on it. I said, yeah, but I don't know if I can because you have a resentment. You know, I'm not sitting out there and say you can't forgive, but when it's habitual, when it's one of those things, it became a thing where I was like, all right, I don't deserve that. And so the divorce was already, we were already done. You know, it was just a matter of her getting out of my house.
How long did y'all date, get married?
So we dated, it was really short too. We dated for about a year, right? Well, we dated for a year and then we got married, but we definitely got married and divorced within the year. So we tried to get an annulment. The one thing about it is that it landed me in jail because of it. So that's why I had to I snapped on her. Oh man, I wanted to rip her head off so bad. So
When you found that out?
no, it's not even when I found out. Even when I found out, I was like over it. I was like, just get out. But what happened was when we separated, she was at her living at her father's house. I had my house, no problem. We're separated. I'm done. I came back home from work one day, and I hear my door open, and she walked in. And funny enough, there was a deal I was working on with her dad, and she popped up from nowhere. I didn't even know she still had a key. And I was sitting on the bed and I heard the door. I picked up my head and she walked through and I was like, hey, what's going on? Like, what are you doing here? Because we were supposed to be working things out. It was a Thursday and I bought 2 plane tickets to New York that Friday. That next day, we were supposed, like, I was trying to work the marriage out, but we promised each other to give each other that space. So she's at her father's, but she popped up. And then she gave me, oh, I need you to sign this for the contract for the house. I said, okay. So I open it, I'm reviewing the papers, and in the back, I see divorce papers, and it was signed and notarized by my homeboy. And I was like, how'd you get all this information? Like, I'm like, so I'm looking and I'm like, is this how you're doing it? I said, I bought tickets for us to go to New York to just get away. And
So she filed.
she filed. But I was the one working, like doing all the extra, like let's go to marriage counseling. I went, she went one time, she wouldn't go the next, but I just kept going. So funny enough, the counselor that I was going to, he owned a Christian college, Maranatha Christian College. And I ended up going to his school, and that's where I got my degree in theology and biblical studies. So I went to his school. But she was standing over me, and I had the papers, and I said, let me ask you something. Why do you treat me like crap? I said, I don't do anything. You have a car, you have money in your account. What's the problem? I said, and she looked at me and she rolled her eyes and she said, because I can. And I think a chemical imbalance happened in my brain at that moment. And all I remember, she was on the ground. I slapped her hard, and I drug her by her hair and I threw her outside the house by her hair and threw her out, and I said, get out. And then she went next door, she called the police. BSO came, like 20 cop cars. They asked me, they came to the house. I kneeled down. They said, yeah. I said, yeah, I did. Got to the car. I asked the officer if he can let me speak to her. She came to the car and she said she was sorry. I said, I'm sorry too. And then they took me to Broward. Good thing I knew somebody who worked at the station in Broward, so I was able to make some calls. I put the house up to bond out. And then I got out in like 48 hours. And I called her and I said, hey, do me a favor, can you switch the ticket for me and make it one flight? She did. And then boom, came back. So I had a record. And so my divorce created a whole thing, but I think it was purposeful. Me being divorced actually helped me go through the process of what made me click. Like I allowed somebody's words to make me react and almost ruin my life because I couldn't control myself. Was I in the wrong? Yeah, I shouldn't have never, I should have contained it, but I was in pain. It was nothing else. I just saw you as a target. So, but she knew what was going on. She knew what it was. She tried to go to the state and drop the charges because she was like, she told the judge I was in the wrong. And she was like, I just want to drop it, but the state wanted to make an example. So luckily I didn't have a public defender. I had a lawyer. So I did 13 weeks anger management, six months of probation. I had a record, couldn't get a job. So that's when the drug thing came into play. And so while I was selling drugs, I opened up a computer company called IT Techs and started repairing laptops and computers. And then that was 2 years after, that's when I met Pam. And then that's when she was like, and I stopped, and I've been with Pam 13 years, married 6 now. That's it.
Yeah.
And the beauty about it was being unevenly yoked. Because I was in the church. My mom's a pastor, father's in the church. I'm going to the church. I know better, but I'm dealing with somebody who's necessarily, I don't want to have to force somebody to love God. That's not my job. My job is to be able to be with somebody who loves God just as much as I do. And I made the decision. So I don't blame her. I blame my choices because, like you mentioned, red flags. And I saw the red flags. I ignored it. You see it, but you just kind of like, it must be
I was going to ask you, how much did, and all y'all can answer, how much did your faith play into the relationship and the divorce? Like, how did you intertwine the two before you got married, and also in your decision to no longer be married to it?
Well, it was, I was always, I mean, she knew the kind of guy I was. I was already going into church, and like, she knew like, hey, I'm going to church, let's we're going to church. But it was always kind of like a resistance, Mm-hmm. And I was like, it was kind of off. So those were the red flags even prior to getting married, because that was my thing. Tuesdays, go to Bible study, I'm there, that's me. You know what I'm saying? If you with me, this is what I do, And so, like I said, when there's resistance, I'm not trying to force nobody, but that also means that I can't see a future with somebody that far, and not to discriminate against other people's religion, but I'm Christian. And unfortunately, whatever other people believe in, that's cool, but for me, I know who Christ is in my life, so I'm a Christ follower. So I rather follow people who are following Christ because it makes my life easier. I'm not trying to change nobody. Mm-hmm. I'm just trying to show myself and be the light, and people can see that and reverence God through that. So I think that also scared her. Mm-hmm. You understand what I'm saying? Because maybe that's not what she really wanted, right? So, but to this day, if I see her and we're cordial, like we didn't have kids together, we didn't, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I got my record sealed, expunged, God,
How long were you guys married?
Well, I was with her for 2 years, but I was married 1 year. So with her 1 year, married 1 year,
okay.
And got divorced. Yeah. So I'm glad we didn't have kids and all of that. But it was a life lesson. It allowed me to meet my wife now, but it made me appreciate her differently, in a different light, And I surely didn't take anything from there and give it to her. And that's one of the things I learned in being in a relationship, whatever. If you're not ready to go into a relationship because you're still hurting from the next one, don't do it. You're hurting, you're gonna literally hurt that other person inadvertently too. You were not even doing it on purpose. It's just, you're not finished healing. Mm-hmm. And my wife now, I told her I was a wreck. I said, I am not easy to deal with. I told her, I wish she was here. She would tell you. I said, if you want to be with me, I need you to understand something. I gave my life to God. I don't know what my steps take me, but I'm a mess. I'm not easy to deal with. If you want to ride with me, we're going to ride. So that's why, So I kind of come with a perspective of being married, being divorced, going through the pitfall, getting back up, getting my life back together, and then finding somebody who definitely is my best helpmate. But I had to go through that gray area. I had to. And I think, I'm okay talking about it. Yeah. Before it was like a sense of shame. You hit a woman? I did. I sure did. And I don't say it proudly. I say it knowing that everybody makes mistakes.
You're
and
owning up to it.
I had to man up. I paid my dues. I did. I paid my dues. And that's the one thing I realized, that if you do something wrong and you don't own up to it, you have to live with that, knowing every waking moment that you know what I'm saying? So I couldn't live in shame, you know? I was embarrassed, you know? It's how you feel a man, you see your wife and the wife brings another man in your house, and you pay the mortgage, you pay the light, you don't pay anything, but you bring a man into my house. When they think about the mental side of why men were in jail, 95% of the men in that jailhouse was because she made me do it. She made me do it. And I started sitting there and I said, I am not these guys. I am not these guys, but man, I'm in here because I did something like whatever these guys did. So 13 weeks anger management turned to 15 weeks anger management because I was paying the state, but I wanted more because I was like, whoa, I didn't know this. I didn't know. And I'm sitting down, there's lawyers, different types of people working in different classes, and I'm like,
everybody going
this
through
is
it.
real. Like, no, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. And so now, when I think about any man, people who are angry or store up anger, it's important for you to have an outlet, because that's why people murder their spouses. So that's why domestic violence is so dangerous. And so they put you in a category of somebody who's a murderer. So they treated me as if I was a murderer, because if I had a weapon, this plant here would be considered a weapon.
Right.
This. They would say, oh, he was holding a vase in his hand as a weapon. And now you get another charge and another charge. So you gotta be careful with the type of people you involve yourself with, because if you don't have yourself under control and that person knows how to push your button, you don't know what you're capable of doing. And I'm telling you, those words were like a brick. Like somebody took a brick and just like, you ever had your manhood taken? Like, you know what that feels like to have somebody, a woman, like make you feel like you are like here?
Yeah.
It broke my ego, whatever little ego I had left. She like cracked it and she found that button and it just clicked. And I said, okay.
What you think her mental state was? Like, what was her?
Well,
Where was she at mentally that had her?
that's one thing I will never know. I never, because I was tired of trying to help her in the process, because I wasn't helping myself. I knew she was cheating. I still gave her a chance the first time. Second time, still gave her a chance. You know what I'm saying? Third time, still like, this is it. But that's when it wasn't, I would resent her for the rest of my life. If we ever stayed together and we decided to, it'd be a lie.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I'd be lying to myself, lying to her. No, there was no love there. There's no respect there. It was finished. You know? It was finished. And when somebody tells you that they don't love you, let them go. Don't fight them. Don't fight them. If a person says, I do not love you, let it go. It's not worth it. And you move fast. Because there is nothing else. At that point, you are a slave at their waking every moment.
Yeah.
And no one wants to be a slave. You know? But then, and literally, when you were talking, I said, man, I get it. Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. Because there's a controlling spirit, you know? And
What was, you kind of answered it, I guess, Sherry and Mike. What was your faith like going into the marriage, during the divorce, and then afterwards? Would you say it was the same? Sounds like yours grew. what was it like for y'all? What kind of impact did it have on your faith going through the divorce?
Going through the divorce?
Yeah, just going into the marriage, going through the divorce, and coming out of it. Like, how did it affect your faith, if any? Did you start questioning things? Were you looking at the Bible like, man, is this what it's supposed to be? Is this real? Was that like, you know what I mean?
I'll
Like,
tell you what, I'll answer both of your questions in one. All right, so I don't think for me, my faith had anything to do with getting married or getting divorced. Right? I think faith, your religion, your belief system has more to do with how you're going to raise the family that you create within the home. So that's why I do think it's very different when people are married with children and when they're not. So if we get married and we get a divorce and we have no kids, we can cease to exist as one. You go your way, I'll go my way. But if you get married and you have kids and you get divorced, it doesn't stop there, right? So who you are, what you believe in is going to carry on way beyond marriage. And that, to me, religion is going to play a part of, right? Your faith, your relationship with God is going to determine how you raise those kids in the marriage and outside the marriage. So I think that part of it is where religion plays more of an effect into the relationship. Now, as far as growing and how it affects you, for me personally, very similar to Richard, I felt like my faith grew a lot more from divorce. And I think the reason why that happens is because two things. So when you get divorced, you can either be just really crushed and hurt by it, because again, it was a relationship that you had with someone that you were looking at as something that's going to be eternally,
Sure.
just the same way you would have a relationship with God. So even though this relationship doesn't work out, you may look at it and you start to look at religion like the same way. Like, wait, I felt that was forever. So why didn't it last? And what turned on me? And then you start to relate your relationship with God. Like, wait, maybe you turned on me too. Because I feel
That's what I
like
was
we
thinking,
should be,
yeah.
me, you, God should be forever, but you keep letting these bad things happen to me. Just like in our relationship, she kept letting these bad things happen to me. Right? But after you grow out of the pain and everything, and then you start to analyze life and you start to decide to make a change, that process starts to bring you closer to God, because then you're looking for an answer. And the truth is, there is no answer outside of Him. So when you go look everywhere else, you're not going to find an answer. But when you start to look to God, then you start getting answers. And stuff start to make sense, because how life goes and what happens to you and how you're being used by God, you don't know. Something may happen to me now in my relationship that has nothing to do with a lesson for me. Maybe it's a lesson for you. Maybe God is using me to teach you a lesson, but I don't know how He's using me. But when you start to accept that you can be that vessel that God uses in any way, shape, or form, and you give yourself to Him and you say, do use me however you please, then you can be more understanding to situations, like why things happen, like, why me? And you stop asking yourself with emptiness, because it is empty when you don't have God, and you start asking, why me? Why did I go through this? Like, I heard Rich talk about how, like, he said, why me? You have this, you have that. That's because you can give physically, you can give what you want emotionally, you can give, but what you're gonna get back, you never know. because it may not be for you. You know, it literally may not be for you. God may just be using you at that moment. But your faith in God and your relationship with God definitely is what's going to give you the strength to be able to deal with the human race and human experience in the long run and be all right with it and heal.
You mentioned change. What changes would you say you made
So,
afterwards, or as to what you were referring to?
yeah, well, changes as far as okay, so I've gone through different changes in life. Way before I got married, I went through a change where I had to deal with my anger issue. Right, I used to be. Everyone knows me as really calm, really cool, but I go 0 to 60 like this, and it could just be a trigger word. Right, you just told me the wrong thing, and now I'm at 60, and you have no idea why. And now I don't know how to stop myself. So that was an anger thing, and I had to see, well, why do I have this negative energy that just takes over me?
Mm-hmm.
So when I used to deal with that, I think it brought me to a place where I was like, okay, because I was conscious of it. All right, can't snap on everything, can't be like that. And I started to tap into more positive energy around me. Not a religious way, but more like a spiritual way, like positive energy. That I'm gonna deal with you. I'm gonna only deal with the positive. I don't want any negativity around me or whatever. Not realizing that's really building a relationship with God, right? Because He is that positive energy in the universe. Anyways, dealing with that, I became more of a positive person, right? When I got married, I was a positive person. Okay? And not that I got married because everything was great. It wasn't. It really wasn't. It was more circumstantial. Let's get married, right? She was pregnant. It seemed like the right thing to do. You know, let's work this out. Let's build a family together.
So y'all weren't really ready at the time.
You know, you're never ready. I'll be honest with you. Like, there's no ready.
Or you didn't feel ready.
You'll always find a reason not to be ready. Always find a reason. I've never met one person who was like, you know, everything was great for me, everything was great for her, so we got married. Never. It's just you come to realization, hey, if we love each other, let's do this, or there is like this is the best thing for us financially, or it's the best thing for us because circumstances of our lives. Let's do it. But it's never really we're ready. But getting into the marriage, so remember I started out positive, and then now I'm having to coexist with another human being.
Mm-hmm.
So now you have to understand, you no longer can be, the nice thing about not being married is, if I have an argument with you right now, I can walk out. I can go home and I can turn to whatever energy that I like at home. Nice bed, let me sit back. I don't have to deal with none of that. Whatever Shari was tripping about, whatever, that's her business. I'm here, I'm at home, I'm cool.
Mm-hmm. Turn
My
the game on.
energy can go back to positive like that. But when you're married, we just have an argument, we both walking into the same room. We're both going to the same bed.
Mm-hmm.
That energy is going to be negative and it's going somewhere. And it's building up as you're there and you don't even realize it. And you could even consciously try to get rid of that energy. For example, we in bed, we mad. You know what? Let's hash this out. I'm sorry. My fault. No, I'm sorry. My fault. Okay. All right. Kiss, make up. There's still something there. Because something was probably said and you're going to think about it. Yo, she really said that. Or he really feels that way. You may let go of it for a second, but you still have that energy in the room.
Like resentment.
Resentment, whatever it may be, there's something there.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it is important to have the playbook that most of us don't have, right? Playbook, which is you should have. It was great you requested counseling. That is the playbook. You have to have the mentor, the counseling, those people around you, the people who help you get back to channeling the positive energy, to being in the right space, to knowing how to really deal with it. Because when you don't know how to deal with it, you think you dealt with it, but you didn't, right? You think going to the room and saying, I'm sorry, everything is good. No, there's a lot more work that has to be done. What was the level of this argument you guys had? What happened? Did you guys talk it out? Sometimes an argument is a good thing. Maybe you need to have that argument. You need to come to some understanding, right? But you need to know how to do it properly. And when you're married, that playbook, most of us don't have it. What is the proper channels? What's the proper step? Did we really get over it? Did you, as a man, we deal with things a lot different, right? And I always tell people this. So guys will have an argument, like we'll argue about something. And we could be good afterwards. I say what I gotta say, you say what you gotta say. We still don't agree, but we feel good. I got out what I had to say. You got out. A woman and a man's argument is not the same thing. And a woman and a woman argument is not the same thing. Right? So we as a man may think like we're back at it. Oh, okay, we got over it. Like I dealt with it. She's good, I'm good. When she may be going through a whole different thing about it. She's like, he didn't hear me. That whole time we had a whole argument, and not once did he hear me. I actually think he listened to me one time. But she's not even going to express it like that. And I'm going to deal with it the way I deal with it with me and you. Like a guy to guy, it's like, he ain't saying nothing about it, he's good. I'm good, he's good. She's holding in something she's not telling. And she will bring it back up. At some point.
It's coming up.
It's coming up because you never dealt with it. But remember, because you actually never dealt with it, you brought that negative energy somewhere. Because you guys never left. That energy feeds. It's like Star Wars, right? It's like the dark side.
It's cancer.
Little by little, yeah, it's a cancer. Little by little, you're going over to the dark side without realizing. And eventually, you both will be there. And I think that's how it builds up and becomes negative. So now in the marriage, I started out positive. I'm dealing with this crazy negative energy where sometimes I don't understand it. Like, where did this come from? Like, what's going on? So now you start to look at your mate like differently. Like, it's like you're sitting at home. If you come home from work and no one's home and you're like, oh, this is great. And they walk through a door and you feel like, oh God, like why did they come home? Why didn't they? You start trying to find reasons why they should be out. You don't want to go hang out with your friends. You know, I heard they're going to so and so. You should get out. You should get out. Have fun. Why? Because you no longer welcome that energy. It's not like you're happy to see them anymore. Because you don't want to be around that energy. You see what I'm saying? So following that, divorce. You go through that stage where you're trying to figure this out, all the negative emotion and everything. At some point for you to heal, the only way to heal is you gotta let go of that negative energy. You don't really try to figure it out. You try to figure out how to get rid of that energy. Go back to positive energy where you feel like you're surrounded by that positive energy. And to do so is to let go. You have to forgive, you have to do whatever it is that you let go of all that negative energy. So now you're able to welcome back positive energy. So you're moving yourself back to what? Closer to God. So that's where the relationship gets back to. So that's why I say build, you do have to have the religious relationship with God, where you know what he wants from you, you're allowing him to use you certain ways, so that now you can get back to, I don't know how you guys were, but for you to, because you've gone through the process, you're remarried. So you can probably speak more about getting to that space. But for me, I'm totally good because I have positive energy back.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, question again.
Uh-huh.
Your faith before and after,
Mhm.
pretty much.
Yeah, I was very naive before going into marriage.
Mhm.
I remember, I can tell you even before I started dating my ex-husband, there was a, it's a little embarrassing. There was a, I was very religious because I was new to the faith.
oh,
To the
okay.
faith. This guy told me, God told me that you're my wife. And I was like, oh no.
You believe?
I believed him. I cried. I was like, God, if that's what you want.
The guy you married?
No.
Oh,
Some other guy.
oh.
I was like, God, if
Yeah,
that's what
somebody
you want.
actually used that one.
Yes.
It works. I
Right.
I guess it does, thank God. I did not. But that's how naive and like religious minded I was. Going into marriage, again, I met, my ex-husband in church. And so, I mean, you going to Bible study? Yeah, I'm going now. All that. Church, tithe, even, in the first year of marriage, once that incident happened where those two women gave me the advice to leave, he was done with church. He was done with tithing. We were done. I was like, okay, guess I'm done too. But I would still play the sermons at home. Going through a little bit further, I had, people, my family, they were calling on family. Can you please just talk to her and tell her that this is not good? So when I would leave, I'd leave him and go back home, my family was in my ear. You need to leave. Can't you see that he doesn't love you? I'm just like, what are you talking about? We're married. And so they were saying, what are you thinking? What's going on with you? It was very kind of negative. They weren't speaking to me the way I needed to be spoken to in that moment. So I wasn't really listening. But he was in my ear like, the Lord says, the scriptures, all that. So I was following that because that's what I wanted. But, I'm listening to sermons every single day. And so growing, there was a lot of infidelity, a lot. I found out, years.
After the divorce?
No, I found out during and after. And more after. And, one of the things, just to, again, give an example of how religious minded I was, I said, okay, I know he cheated, but that's not the reason I'm going to get a divorce, because I was willing to forgive and work on it. I'm not saying I'll always be like that. I'm just saying, at the time, I was I was willing to work through that process for the sake of the marriage. And I said, if that's not my reason for wanting to get this divorce, should I still get a divorce? Because technically, the Bible talks about adultery is the way out. And he did that, so can't I just go? But if that's not my reason, then that can't be, why I get the divorce. Just in my head about all of this stuff. Even Bible also says God hates divorce. I was like, okay, so that means I can't get a divorce. So what do I do? Because something's not right here. This is a mess. Having kids, again, makes you want to stay in. I don't want my kids to grow up, with their parents separated, divorced. Nobody wants that for their kids. But continuing to listen, continuing to grow, continuing to hear from God for myself. And, he would always tell me, you're such a victim. You're such a victim. I was like, no, I'm not. You're actually doing stuff. And I felt like a part of that was true. But as I was growing deeper in my faith, I remember there was one morning I woke up early to spend time with God. And God put on my heart, like, you are a bit self-righteous. Now, just calm down a little bit. Yeah. And this is when I was printing out scriptures and highlighting and writing, like trying to figure out this divorce, marriage, what should I do here? And I went and I apologized, like, being self-righteous. Like, yeah, you are being self-righteous. But I continued to spend time with God, and it just got to a point after we got a divorce, and then he was like, okay, but come on, we're still spiritually married, even though we got a divorce. And I was like, that's a thing? I mean, so again, I was in my head again, and I convinced myself that that's true, and I lost my train of thought with that one. But closer to the end of the marriage, I decided, we're not married. Like, we can't be doing things that married people do. If you catch my drift.
What was your faith at the point of, like you said, you were going back and forth about it? What led you? Did you file for divorce?
I filed.
What led you to that point, as you were going back and forth with God about it, where you made the decision to do it? Did you
Honestly,
feel God was telling you to
I
do
felt
it?
God was telling me to separate from him,
Okay.
for sure. I can't tell you God hates divorce. It's not backed up biblically. But I know for me, what gave me some solace was the fact that he had cheated. And I was like, well, I separated, and he kept texting me like, so are you gonna get a divorce? I don't have time to waste. Like, I said, I wanna just be separated right now. Like, I need to figure it out. I don't wanna just jump into divorce. And it was, you need a divorce? Come on, no. If you need money to get the divorce, I can give you the money. To the point I was finally just like, might as well. He clearly doesn't care anymore. So I might as well. But man, when the news that the divorce was final came, my heart sunk. Because that's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted for my life. Then, I want to say a month later, we started to attempt to reconcile. That lasted for about 1.5 years. So, near the end, what really got me to the point, I'm not going to give the exact story that happened, but basically, I had 3 kids at that point, 3 children, and I think at the time they were 5, 3, and 3 months. And I basically felt like I was a single mother for 8 years at this point. But at that point, for 5 years, I felt like I was a single mom, which I think a lot of mothers feel. I've heard many, many mothers say that they feel like a single mother within their marriage. And I asked him, can you please, do something with the kids? Because I was working full time. I just had a baby, so I'm feeding, breastfeeding. He said, no, you did it today, you could do it again. I was livid, and I was like, I'm done. I'm tired. I can't do this anymore. And I left, and that was it. But at that point, I had pulled myself out of the religious way of thinking. I spent so much time with God, and I was building a relationship. It was no longer a religion to me, it was a relationship. And I realized in hindsight how much I had missed God because I was trying to be so religious. Mm-hmm. And to me, God hates divorce then became, God doesn't hate divorce because he hates people who divorce. God hates divorce because he understands what it does to people who are married. Mm-hmm. It tears them up, and he never wanted that for us. And that's what settled my mind. God loves my kids more than I do. And so staying together for the sake of the kids was not something, I thought it was better to leave than to have them grow up thinking that this was okay. Because we weren't going to counseling anymore. We tried it like twice, and then he didn't want to do it anymore. So I was like, I'm done. I can't do this. And we were already divorced, so I just left.